This video was kindly sponsored by my supporters on Patreon. Before we begin, if you haven't already, please subscribe and hit the bell icon to keep up to date with all my upcoming history videos. You can support new videos through Patreon. Also be sure to check out part 1 if you haven't already. Manny Man does history. England had been ruled by Anglo-Saxon kings for hundreds of years. Vikings from Scandinavia raided all over Europe. These Norsemen settled in many places, including the peninsula of Normandy, across the water from England. These people would become known as the Normans. They had many connections with England. Emma of Normandy had been married to the King of England, Ethelred the Unready, of the House of Wessex. When he and his son Edmund died, the Norse invader Knut the Great of Denmark became king. Knut married Emma to strengthen his foothold in England. Her sons by Ethelred, Alfred and Edward, fled England as Knut began killing any rivals. The brothers stayed in Normandy in exile with their cousins. Edward would eventually come in line to become King of England. He and his Norman cousin, William II, Duke of Normandy, had an understanding that the English crown would pass to William upon Edward's death. However, throughout Edward's reign as King of England, he was surrounded by the powerful House of Godwin, who had been growing in strength and influence in England. Upon his deathbed, Edward the Confessor declared that Harold Godwinson would become king, much to the displeasure of William of Normandy and Harold Hardrada of Norway, who had also acclaimed the English throne. Harold Hardrada arrived from Norway but was defeated by Harold Godwinson. Meanwhile, in Normandy, William amassed a massive fleet and landed in England with an army. He fought Harold at the Battle of Hastings, in which Harold was killed and the Anglo-Saxons were defeated by the Normans. The Anglo-Saxon Council of Powerful Lords, the Wittengemot, elected Edgar the Atheling, great-grandson of Ethelred the Unready, to be king. But as William's forces pushed up through England, they all bent the knee to the Norman invader, and William the Conqueror became King of England, beginning the swift Norman Conquest of England. William was crowned in what is now Westminster Abbey, starting the tradition of English monarchs being crowned there, although it is possible that Harold Godwinson was crowned there before him. William established Norman lords throughout England and made a form of French the spoken language of the royal court. Peasants continued speaking Old English, which explains why French and in turn Latin-based words in today's English have a posher connotation than their Anglo-Saxon-rooted counterparts, for example, fraternity versus brotherhood. William built loads of castles, including the White Tower of London. He had a great survey of all the land and landowners written down in the Domesday Book. After conquering England, William went off to mainland Europe to conquer some more and died. His son Robert became Duke of Normandy, while the English throne passed to his other son William Rufus, dividing the kingdom. After a brief rebellion, William II became a strong ruler with a lust for life. He never married, and it is reckoned by some historians that he was gay. He extended control over parts of Scotland and Wales. His brother Robert left control of Normandy to William while he went off on crusades to the Holy Lands. William was killed by an arrow while out hunting. His younger brother Henry Beauclerk quickly became King Henry I. His older brother Robert returned from the Crusades and invaded England in 1101, disputing Henry's claim, but they came to an agreement. Only for Henry to later invade Normandy and defeat Robert, imprisoning him for the rest of his life. He fought against several French challengers, but eventually came to peace with Louis VI. Despite having many illegitimate children, Henry's only legitimate son William died at sea, so Henry named his daughter Matilda his heir and married her to Geoffrey of Anjou. Henry ended up falling out with them too. Upon Henry's death, however, his nephew Stephen of Blois seized the crown, leading to the long civil war known as the Anarchy. Matilda's forces ultimately captured Stephen's forces, and she was nearly crowned the first Queen of England, but the crowds in London objected and she fled to Oxford. Later, after being released, Stephen tried to make his son Eustace co-king, but that wasn't recognised, only for Eustace to die anyway. Raging. Stephen ultimately agreed that Matilda's son Henry would become king when Stephen died, so that's exactly what happened. The union of Matilda and Geoffrey of Anjou brought the House of Anjou, and indeed the territory of Anjou, into the English crown, and this house would rule the Angevin Empire for the rest of the 12th century. Matilda was in fact a descendant of Ethelred the Unready, so the old Anglo-Saxon blood of the House of Wessex flowed once more within the English crown. The House of Anjou would later gain the name Plantagenet, after Geoffrey's nickname. His son Henry II would later be recognised as the first Plantagenet king. Henry II was a young and ruthless leader. His power expanded across the west of France, which annoyed the French king Louis VII. There was much tension between Henry and the Church, particularly with his former friend Thomas Becket, the Archbishop of Canterbury. Henry went against the Pope's rules and had his son Henry, the young king, crowned alongside him as junior king, but young Henry held little real power. Tensions with Thomas Becket got so bad that 4 knights were sent to arrest Becket, but ended up murdering him in front of the altar of Canterbury Cathedral, which caused huge international scandal. Shortly after, Henry reinforced an invasion of Ireland, which would begin a very, very long occupation. Henry's many sons grew impatient about their inheritance and led a revolt against their father, but they were ultimately quelled. After 13 years of being junior king, young Henry died before his father did. Older Henry also had trouble with his son Richard, who'd been turned against him by the new French king Philippe Auguste. Henry threatened to make Richard's younger brother, and Henry's favourite, John, his heir, but when Henry learned that John had sided with Richard, he collapsed and died later of a bleeding ulcer. Richard the Lionheart then became King of England, although he very rarely came to England as king, basing himself mainly in the Duchy of Aquitaine. Richard took loads of money from his kingdom and led the Third Crusade to the Holy Lands with King Philippe Auguste of France to take back Jerusalem, which had been captured by Saladin. King Philip went home early. Richard was unsuccessful recapturing Jerusalem, but managed to safeguard unarmed Christians to visit the city. On his way home, Richard was captured by Leopold of Austria and ransomed by the Holy Roman Emperor Heinrich VI. He was eventually released and returned to find Normandy captured by Philippe Auguste. Richard was recrowned in Westminster to rid the shame of his captivity. His coat of arms, the 3 lions, became the royal arms of England. Richard recaptured Normandy and built a huge, highly advanced castle, Chateau Gaillard, to defend Normandy. He fought against Philippe for years, and finally, during a small siege, he was struck by a bolt from a crossbow. As it turned out, it was a boy who claimed to be avenging his parents. As Richard lay dying, he forgave the boy who had been brought before him. The boy was released. But once Richard died, the boy was flayed alive and hanged. Oh, medieval times. Richard's brother John became king. Having been the youngest of his brothers, John was nicknamed John Lackland because he was probably not going to inherit much land. He was, however, his father's favourite and was granted loads of land, including the lordship of Ireland. As king, John was very unpopular. He raised taxes to fight France, but was defeated and his empire in France collapsed. He'd wasted so much money in the war that the barons of England were in revolt. When the barons captured London, John met with the rebels at Runnymede, and they negotiated and agreed to the Magna Carta, the Great Charter, an agreement that limited the king's power over the people and the church, and would ultimately become the foundation of the Constitution of the United Kingdom, and indeed the United States of America. But back then, in 1215, both sides ignored it and continued fighting. Philippe of France's son, Prince Louis, came to help the barons, conquering much of South England. The barons proclaimed Louis King of England, but he was never actually crowned. John ultimately died of dysentery, and the barons abandoned Louis for John's 9-year-old son Henry, who became King Henry III. Would this child follow the Magna Carta and bring peace to the kingdom? Find out in part 3. Thanks for watching, folks. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified as soon as part 3 and indeed all my other videos come out. You can support the creation of these videos on Patreon and enjoy a load of benefits, including custom Manny Man profile pictures and much more. I've just launched my new colouring book featuring 22 pages of Irish history. You can buy it and much more Manny Man merch at johndruddy.com. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch and TikTok, where I post daily history facts and loads of updates on my work. You can also find my podcast, Where Many Have Gone Before, on Spotify and Apple Music, where I watch Star Trek for the very first time. Special welcome to my newcomers on Patreon, Ace and Thomas Woods. Thanks to all my patrons: Alexander, Arthur Revan, Carol Basil, Chair DJ, Colton Sayer, Crystal, David Stranad, Dav McGee, Dustin Holden, Emer Gibson, Senin, age 10, Helena Rowe Bradley, Jefferson Yates, Joshua Benjamin Heisler, Judy Friesen, Catherine Gilks, Kythius, Kindy K, Lapre Shea Queenvara, M, Marcus Booker, Mike Wise, Monday Rico, Mr. Magnificent, Mr. Research, Classy Black Man, Mr. Easy Play 2, Mycroft, Myth Nguyen, Ollie Coors, Rocket Wrench, Ryan Ilano, SB, Soares, I think I finally pronounced that properly, Stephanie Lenz, Tanmay, Travis Dunn, Wendy Barley. Once again, thank you. And Happy Christmas. And if you're watching this beyond Christmas, then happy, hopeful post-COVID times, because hopefully we'll get beyond this. I assume. Anyway, bye.